This janitor just stopped a billionaire's funeral, but not to pay his respects. You see, as he leaned over the opened casket to clean a smudge, he noticed something that shouldn't be scientifically possible. A single bead of sweat rolling down the dead woman's temple. Corpses don't sweat, but when he screamed that she was still alive, her family didn't call a doctor. They ordered security to throw him out. Now the question is, why was the stepmother so desperate to bury her daughter before she woke up? If this story resonates with you, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow Lucas and I will be giving you another story just as crazy as this one. You don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. Lucas Bennett had mastered the art of being a ghost. At 32, he was a man built for heavy lifting and hard truths, with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of the world. But in the gleaming hallways of Sterling Enterprises, he was just the help. He moved in the periphery of wealth, buffing the Italian marble floors until they reflected the suits of men who wouldn't hesitate to step over him if he died right there. He did it for Maya. His 6-year-old daughter was the only reason Lucas swallowed his pride every morning, putting on the gray uniform that made him invisible. He needed the insurance. He needed the steady check. Serafina Sterling was the opposite of invisible. At 27, the heiress to the Sterling Empire was the most photographed woman in the city. She was undeniably beautiful, a striking figure with dark hair and an elegance that seemed to command the air around her. But lately she looked like a porcelain doll that was cracking. Lucas had seen it. While emptying the trash in the executive wing, he'd catch glimpses of her. She wasn't imperious or cruel like the board members who circled her like sharks. She looked terrified. 3 days ago, their worlds had brushed against each other. Serafina had stumbled in the hallway, dropping a file. Lucas had rushed to help her, his hand briefly steadying her arm. "Are you okay, Miss Sterling?" he had asked, his voice low and steady. She had looked at him then, really looked at him, with eyes that were screaming for help. I don't know who to trust," she had whispered, before her stepmother, a woman with ice in her veins, had swept in and pulled her away. That was the last time anyone saw Serafina alive. The news broke yesterday morning. Heart failure, a tragedy, a rush to close the casket. And now Lucas was standing in the Sterling Estate's grand parlor, tasked with setting up the chairs for her funeral, watching the very people who terrified her pretend to cry. Whatever you do, don't scroll away. I have a question for you. Have you ever felt like you were screaming for help in a crowded room, but you were completely invisible to the people around you? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. The funeral service was a masterclass in hypocrisy. It was held in the Sterling Estate's grand ballroom, chilled to a meat locker temperature to preserve the open casket. Lucas stood by the velvet ropes, holding a dustpan he wasn't allowed to use yet, watching Serafina's stepmother, Elena, dab at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. "My daughter was fragile," Elena sobbed into the microphone, her voice trembling with a grief that didn't reach her cold, predatory eyes. "But now she is at peace." The priest nodded solemnly and motioned for the casket to be closed. This was it. The finality of the moment pressed against Lucas's chest like a physical weight. As the pallbearers stepped forward, men in suits who looked more like security guards than mourners, Lucas stepped closer, ostensibly to remove a fallen petal from the casket's silk lining. He looked down at Serafina. Even in death she was breathtaking, her pale skin glowing against the dark satin. But as he leaned in, the air conditioning vent above them rattled, sending a blast of freezing air down. That's when he saw it. A single tiny bead of sweat formed at her hairline and rolled down her temple. Lucas froze. The room went silent in his head, the drone of the priest fading into white noise. Corpses don't sweat, especially not in a freezing room. His eyes darted to her neck. There was no rise and fall of her chest, but then he saw her pinky finger, resting against the white silk, twitch. It wasn't a settling of nerves. It was a spasm, a fight. She's fighting the paralysis, Lucas realized, a sudden violent memory of his past medical training flashing in his mind. They're burying her alive. The pallbearers gripped the heavy mahogany lid. The shadow began to fall over her face. "Wait!" The word ripped out of Lucas's throat, raw and unpolished, shattering the somber atmosphere. He didn't just speak, he lunged, shoving a confused pallbearer aside and throwing his arm out to block the lid from descending. "Stop!" Lucas roared, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "Don't close it! She's not dead!" The silence that followed Lucas's scream was heavier than the casket lid. For a heartbeat, everyone stared, the mourners in shock, the priest in confusion, and Elena with a look of pure, venomous hatred. "What is the meaning of this?" Elena hissed, stepping down from the podium. Her grief vanished instantly, replaced by the sharp authority of a woman used to crushing anything in her way. "Security! Get this filth away from my daughter!" Two burly security guards in dark suits materialized from the shadows, grabbing Lucas by the shoulders. They were strong, but Lucas was desperate. He didn't strike back, but he planted his feet, gripping the edge of the casket with white-knuckled force. "Look at her!" Lucas shouted, locking eyes with the front row of stunned business partners. "Look at her temple! She's sweating! She's paralyzed, not dead!" "He's drunk," Elena announced loudly, turning to the crowd with a practiced, pitiful shake of her head. "He's been harassing the staff for weeks, a disturbed janitor with a hero complex. Please, remove him so my daughter can rest." The guards yanked him backward, breaking his grip on the mahogany. Lucas stumbled, his uniform tearing at the shoulder. The shame of it burned, the way they looked at him like he was garbage, like his voice didn't matter because of the clothes he wore. It would be so easy to let them drag him out. He would keep his job, he would go home to Maya. But then he saw the lid coming down again. He saw the darkness about to swallow Serafina forever. No. Lucas didn't think, he reacted. He twisted violently, using the guards' momentum against them, breaking free just long enough to lunge at the frantic young paramedic standing near the back, who had been hired merely for formality. "Check her pulse," Lucas pleaded, grabbing the medic's lapels, his eyes wild and terrifyingly sincere. "Not the neck, check the femoral artery. It's faint, but it's there. If you let her bury her, you're murdering her." The medic hesitated, looking from the furious Elena to the desperate janitor. The accusation of murder hung in the air, thick and suffocating. "Don't you dare touch her," Elena shrieked, her composure cracking. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The room was watching. The medic, driven by fear or duty, stepped around the security guards and placed 2 fingers firmly on Serafina's wrist. The room held its breath. The medic pressed his fingers harder into the pale skin of her wrist. Seconds ticked by like hours. Then the medic's eyes went wide. He gasped, stumbling back as if burned. I have a pulse," he shouted, his voice cracking. "It's thready, but it's there. She's alive." Pandemonium erupted. The grieving crowd surged forward, smartphones raised to capture the miracle. Elena went white, not with relief, but with terror. But before she could spin a new lie, a guttural, terrifying sound tore from the casket. Gasp! Serafina's back arched off the silk lining, her lungs paralyzed for days, violently sucked in the freezing air. Her eyes flew open, wide, unseeing, and filled with primal panic. She thrashed, knocking the flowers aside, coughing uncontrollably as her body woke up from the chemically induced coma. "Serafina, my darling!" Elena shrieked, rushing forward to grab her shoulders, her nails digging in. "You're alive! It's a miracle!" But at the touch of her stepmother's hands, Serafina screamed, a raw, raspy sound of pure fear. She flailed blindly, her hand striking out until it found something solid. It wasn't the silk, it wasn't the priest, it was rough fabric, it was Lucas's arm. Her fingers, ice cold and trembling, clamped onto Lucas's wrist with a bruising grip. She looked up, her vision blurring, locking on to the only person in the room who didn't look like a vulture. She saw the gray uniform. She saw the kindness in his terrified eyes. "Don't let them," she rasped, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "Don't let her take me." When the paramedics loaded her onto the stretcher, she refused to let go. They tried to pry her fingers off Lucas's arm, but she started hyperventilating, the monitors screaming warnings. "He comes with us," the lead paramedic barked, shoving Lucas toward the ambulance doors. "If he keeps her heart rate down, he rides."
And just like that, the invisible janitor and the resurrected billionaire were locked together in the back of a speeding ambulance, the siren wailing a barrier between them and the rest of the world. Lucas sat on the bench, his hand still trapped in hers, watching the woman who owned the building cling to him as if he was the only solid thing left on Earth.
The hospital room was quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the funeral. It was 3 a.m. Lucas sat in a stiff plastic chair by the door, still wearing his torn, dirty uniform. He shouldn't be here. The hospital staff had tried to send him home, and Elena's lawyers were undoubtedly drafting restraining orders, but Serafina had panicked every time he moved toward the exit. She was awake now, staring at the ceiling. The doctors had confirmed it, a massive dose of a rare neurotoxin that mimicked rigorous mortis. Why? Her voice was a scratchy whisper. She turned her head on the pillow, looking at him. Her eyes were stripped of the icy armor she wore at the office. She looked young and small. Why did you scream? Everyone else just wanted the money. Why did you look close enough to see? Lucas looked down at his rough hands. My wife, he said softly. The admission hung in the air. She died 4 years ago. Cancer. I sat by her bed for 6 months. I learned every rhythm of her breathing. I learned that death, real death, it has a specific look, a hollowness. He met Serafina's eyes. You didn't look hollow. You looked trapped. Serafina let out a shaky breath, her tears sliding into her hair. I was, she whispered. I heard them, Lucas. I was paralyzed, but I could hear everything. I heard Elena ordering the closed casket. I heard them discussing the inheritance. I was screaming in my head, begging God for just one person to notice I was still there. She reached out, her hand trembling, and this time Lucas took it voluntarily, his calloused fingers wrapped around her delicate ones. I knew the tea tasted bitter, she confessed, her voice breaking, but I drank it because my father gave it to me before he died. I thought I was keeping a tradition alive. I didn't know Elena had spiked the supply. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy with shared trauma. The billionaire heiress and the janitor were no longer defined by their bank accounts. They were just two people who knew what it felt like to be betrayed by life. The next 48 hours existed in a bubble, separate from the storm raging outside the hospital walls. Elena was fighting legal battles to get access, but the doctors, spooked by the poison allegations, had barred all visitors except the man Serafina claimed was her private security, Lucas. It was the first time in 10 years Serafina hadn't checked a stock ticker or answered an email. Instead, she was learning how to eat green jello from a plastic cup. It's wiggly, she muttered, staring at the spoon with suspicion. Is this actually food? Lucas chuckled, a low, warm sound that made the sterile room feel smaller, safer. He was peeling an orange for her, his movements methodical and gentle. My daughter Maya swears it's a food group. She calls it wobbly juice. It's the only thing she'll eat when she has the flu. You have a daughter? Serafina looked at him, really seeing him, not as the janitor or the savior, but as a father. She's 6, Lucas said, a soft smile touching his eyes as he handed her a slice of orange. She's the boss of the house. I just pay the rent. Serafina took the orange slice, her fingers brushing his. The electric shock of the contact made them both pause. You risked her future, she said quietly. If you had been wrong, if I really had been dead, you would have gone to jail. You would have lost her. Lucas stopped peeling. He looked out the window, his jaw tightening. I know, but I looked at you and I thought, if that was Maya in 20 years, if she was alone, surrounded by people who didn't care, I would pray someone was brave enough to speak up. Serafina felt a crack in her chest, not of pain, but of something healing.
For years, men had looked at her with calculation, estimating her net worth or her social value. Lucas looked at her and saw a daughter, a human, a life worth saving simply because it was a life. "I've never had anyone brave enough for me," she whispered. She leaned back against the pillows, closing her eyes, but her hand drifted across the sheet, finding his again. This time he didn't pull away. They sat in the quiet hum of the machines, a janitor and a billionaire, bound by a silence that felt more intimate than any conversation she'd ever had in a boardroom.
The bubble didn't just pop. It was smashed by a battering ram of legal paperwork and uniformed officers. The door to the hospital room banged open. Elena strode in, flanked not by doctors, but by the chief of police and two high-priced lawyers. She didn't look like a grieving mother anymore. She looked like a CEO closing a merger. "That's him," Elena said, pointing a manicured finger at Lucas, "the man who poisoned my daughter." Lucas stood up, placing himself between the door and the bed. "What? That's insane! I saved her!" "Did you?" Elena's voice was smooth, dangerous silk. She pulled a plastic bag from her designer purse. Inside was a small vial. "Security found this in your locker, Mr. Bennett, a sedative derived from pufferfish, the exact toxin found in Serafina's blood." "You planted that," Lucas roared, stepping forward, but the police officers were on him instantly, slamming him against the wall. The impact knocked the wind out of him. "Serafina!" Lucas shouted, turning his head to look at her. Tell them I didn't do this!" Serafina struggled to sit up, her head swimming. The doctors had given her new meds. She was foggy, weak. She looked at the vial. She looked at Elena's terrified, convincing face. Then she looked at Lucas, a man she had known for only 2 days, a man who knew exactly when she was dying, a man who knew exactly how to save her. "How did you know, Lucas?" Elena whispered, leaning over the bed, blocking Serafina's view of him. "How does a janitor know rare medical symptoms unless he caused them? He wanted a reward. He wanted to play the hero." Serafina hesitated. It was only for a second, a flicker of doubt born of a lifetime of betrayal, but Lucas saw it. He saw the question in her eyes. That hesitation broke him. "I have a daughter," Lucas said, his voice dropping, rough with betrayal. I would never risk her for your money." "Get him out of here," Elena snapped. As they dragged Lucas out in handcuffs, Serafina didn't scream for him to stay. She slumped back against the pillows, her tears blurring her vision, paralyzed once again, not by poison, but by doubt. Put yourself in Serafina's shoes right now. She's drugged, traumatized, and her family has proof. Who would you trust, the family with the evidence or the stranger with the heart? Let me know in the comments. The silence in Lucas's small apartment was louder than the sirens had been. He sat at his kitchen table, head in his hands. The police had released him pending lab results. The evidence in his locker was circumstantial, and they didn't have fingerprints yet, but the damage was done. He was fired. His name was mud, and worst of all, he had seen the doubt in Serafina's eyes. In the next room, Maya was sleeping. He had almost lost her today. He had played the hero, and for what? To be branded a villain? Pack, his brain told him. Pack the car, take Maya, leave town before they manufacture enough evidence to lock you away for good. Across the city, Serafina sat in her bedroom, the same room she had been paralyzed in. The air was thick with the scent of expensive lilies, suffocating and sweet. Elena walked in, smiling that tight, victorious smile. She carried a steaming porcelain cup. "Drink this, darling. It's chamomile. It will help you forget that awful man." Serafina took the cup. The steam rose, hitting her face. Under the floral notes of the tea, she smelled it. A faint, metallic tang. The same smell that had lingered on her breath the day she collapsed. Her hand froze. She looked at Elena. Her stepmother wasn't looking at her face. She was watching Serafina's throat, waiting for her to swallow. She didn't save me, Serafina realized, a cold horror washing over her. She's finishing the job. Serafina feigned a sip, then set the cup down.
"I'll let it cool," she whispered. As soon as Elena left the room, Serafina scrambled for her phone. Her fingers shook as she dialed the number she had memorized from the police report on the counter. It rang once, twice, 3 times. In his kitchen, Lucas stared at the vibrating phone. Unknown number. He knew who it was. If he answered, he was back in the game. If he answered, he was putting a target on his back again. Let it ring, his fear screamed. Save yourself. He looked at Maya's door. He remembered what he told Serafina. I would pray someone was brave enough to speak up. He wasn't just a janitor. He was a father who taught his daughter to stand up for the truth. Lucas picked up the phone. "Don't drink the tea," his voice hard as stone. "Lucas," Serafina sobbed, the sound tiny and broken. "She's here. I'm trapped. Please." Lucas stood up, grabbing his keys. The fear was still there, but the hesitation was gone. "Lock your door. Push the dresser in front of it. I'm coming."
Lucas didn't use his key card this time. He used his shoulder. He hit the heavy oak doors of the master suite just as the sound of shattering glass came from inside. The wood splintered, and Lucas burst into the room. Elena was there, standing over Serafina, a jagged shard of the broken teacup in her hand. "You ruin everything!" Elena shrieked, raising the shard. Lucas didn't hesitate. He tackled Elena, his momentum carrying them both to the floor. He wasn't a fighter, but he was a father defending the innocent. He pinned her wrist to the carpet, kicking the shard away. "It's over, Elena," he panted, his face inches from hers. "The police are already at the gate. I sent them the recording." When the sirens finally pierced the night air, they didn't come for the janitor. They came for the widow. 3 months later, the Sterling estate was up for sale. Serafina stood by the front gates, watching the "for sale" sign being hammered into the ground. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, no power suit, no armor. A beat-up sedan pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down, revealing Lucas. He looked different too. He wasn't wearing a gray uniform. He was wearing a button-down shirt, his arm resting casually on the door. In the back seat, a little girl with pigtails, Maya, waved enthusiastically. "You sure about this?" Lucas asked, stepping out of the car. "That's a lot of marble to walk away from." Serafina smiled. It wasn't the polite, terrified smile of the heiress. It was real. "It was never a home, Lucas. It was just a fancy coffin. I'm done being dead." She walked over to him. She didn't offer a handshake. She reached up, cupping his face, and kissed him. It was a promise, a seal on a future that belonged only to them. "Besides," she whispered against his lips, glancing at the little girl in the back seat, "I have a new job offer. Maya needs a co-pilot for her Lego empire." Lucas laughed, opening the passenger door for her. "The pay's terrible, but the benefits are great." As they drove away, leaving the cold golden cage of the Sterling Empire behind, Serafina looked in the side mirror. She saw the empty driveway. She saw the ghost of the girl she used to be, but she didn't look back. She looked at the man driving the car, the invisible janitor who had seen her when the whole world looked away. Lucas risked everything because he saw the value of a life over a paycheck. If you enjoyed this story of justice and true love, please like the video and subscribe. It helps us bring more stories like this to life. See you in the next one. Thank you for watching another story of Lucas Bennett to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as wild and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So, subscribe. Lucas and I will be waiting for you tomorrow.